open ocean is a place of many mysteries. Many scientists believe that over 80% of the ocean is unexplored, and there are most likely numerous forms of life in the depths of the high seas that have not yet been classified. Unfortunately, the ocean has also been the site of more than a few tragedies. The high seas are home to many accidents and its fair share of occurrences that were carried out on purpose. By all accounts, Captain John Gray was a very competent mariner. He was born on December 8th of 1819 in the Shetland Isles, and he took an interest in the sea from a young age. During his career, John was made second officer of the SS Great Britain and eventually rose through the ranks, becoming first officer and finally captain. He held the longest tenure of any captain on the SS Great Britain and completed 27 voyages from the United Kingdom to Australia. Beyond being good at his job, John was also described as a popular and kind man. His passengers often reported that he actively tried to make everyone more comfortable on his ship, and he even had a habit of walking the decks with women who were traveling alone to make them feel safe. Unfortunately, John's story was not one that would end happily. On the night of November 25, 1872, the SS Great Britain was returning to the UK from Melbourne, Australia. On this fateful night, John was heard complaining about discomfort in his bowels, and he returned to his cabin, presumably to rest and get through the pain. At around midnight, he was seen walking towards the deck of the ship. This was the last time anyone ever saw John Gray. When it was discovered that the captain was missing, the crew searched the ship for any sign of their captain, but came up empty-handed. Besides his disappearance, they only found two things out of place. A window at the ship's stern had been left open despite having been locked the previous night, and a letter that John had been writing that night was missing. The first and most obvious theory was that John had somehow fallen overboard and drowned, a tragic accident which does happen fairly often at sea. Maybe John had been trying to relieve his bowels into the ocean, lost his balance, and tumbled into the depths with the letter in his pocket. A second, even more disturbing theory has been posited. This theory suggests that the letter may have contained some kind of sensitive information, and one of the people on the ship murdered John and disposed of the letter. This theory has never been substantiated in any way, however. The contents of the letter are unknown to the public, and nobody was ever arrested in connection to John's death. In the years following the mysterious disappearance of the good captain, crew members and passengers reported some unsettling occurrences aboard the SS Great Britain. Apparently, his boots could be heard dragging across the deck, and doors around the ship have been said to open and close with no visible cause. As a result of these incidents, the more superstitious people who have studied this case believe that John's spirit still resides on the SS Great Britain. Regardless of the truth, this case is a terrifying reminder that the open ocean contains numerous mysteries that will most likely never be solved. The Northwest Passage is a lane through the Arctic Ocean that connects the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. This path travels along the northern coast of current-day Canada. Due to the extremely low temperatures of much of the route, it has been a treacherous lane for many. One of the most infamous tragedies to ever occur in the Northwest Passage is the Octavius ghost ship. The Octavius was built during the 18th century and was ready to set sail in 1761. In 1762, the Octavius would take a fateful journey through the Northwest Passage. The ship was traveling from England to an unspecified location in Asia. The trip to Asia was successful, and the weather had been very good. Because of this, the captain decided to go through the passage. Not only had the weather been a blessing, but if he was successful, the captain would be the first person to ever successfully navigate the passage. Besides, using the treacherous route would significantly cut down on the time it took to return home. The captain decided to go ahead with this risky move, and it proved to be a mistake. The Octavius vanished roughly 250 miles north of Alaska. Its movements after that were unknown, and they were presumed dead. Almost 13 years later, a whaling ship called the Herald came upon an intriguing discovery. They found a ship buried in ice on the coast of Greenland. There was some decay on the ship, but it had been mostly preserved by the ice. The crew of the Herald saw this as an opportunity to search the ship for any valuables, but what they found chilled them to the bone. 28 people were dead below decks, each of their corpses preserved by the same ice that had buried their ship. Their bodies were sitting or lying down in the same positions they would have been in during their lives. The captain was found in his cabin, sitting at his desk with a pen in hand. It looked as if he had been writing in the captain's log when he succumbed to the cold. Next to him were his wife and child, huddled together under some blankets. These sights were enough to discourage the crew of the Herald from taking anything from the ship, with the exception of the captain's log. They were understandably curious as to what had happened to the ship. The last log ever written was dated November 11th, 1762. Before the Herald had discovered the Octavius, the last known location had been near Alaska. The ship was found on the coast of Greenland, however, suggesting that the ship had managed to successfully navigate the Northwest Passage. Unfortunately, the Octavius had done this without the help of its crew. This case has been studied quite thoroughly, but there remain numerous unanswered questions and details that don't seem as if they track. For example, a ship's crew succumbing to hypothermia and exposure is nothing out of the ordinary, but the way their bodies were positioned certainly is. It seems highly unlikely that the captain instantly froze to death in the middle of writing in his log. Historical and medical experts alike have looked into this incident and come away confused. As of now, there is no explanation for the bizarre circumstances aboard the Octavius. Some people have posited the theory that some of the details of the Octavius story were exaggerated and not entirely true. For example, the detail of the captain being found at his desk could have simply been meant to dramatize the discovery. However, others have suggested that the bodies of the crew could have been staged in the positions they were found in, although by who remains a mystery. In any case, the mystery of the Octavius ghost ship is still a tale that fits the old adage, better safe than sorry. If the captain had simply sailed along his original route, maybe the crew would have stayed safe. When you hear about Disney cruises, you most likely think about a fun family vacation. Well, maybe you think about how expensive they must be, but you likely don't think about the potential dangers. The sad truth is that even a Disney cruise can be deadly. Rebecca Corium was born on March 11th of 1987 in Chester, England. When she was a teenager, she joined the British Army Cadets and also studied sports science at Plymouth University. She took youth studies in addition to her other ventures, and she became a volunteer staff for the cadets. In 2010, Rebecca interviewed for employment with Disney Cruises. By all accounts, she was a happy and energetic person, which was undoubtedly why Disney Cruises hired her. She went through the training process, began her career on cruises to the Bahamas, and eventually found herself working on the Disney Wonder. At some point, her grandfather passed away and she returned to England for his funeral. In a cruel twist of fate, this would be the last time her family would ever see her. When Rebecca returned to work, she kept in contact with her family through Facebook and Skype. On March 21st of 2011, she sent a Facebook message to her parents promising to give them a phone call the next day. 12 hours later, and Rebecca's mother had received no such call. On the Disney Wonder, Rebecca's co-workers were concerned when she failed to arrive for her morning shift. She wasn't in her room, or, as far as they could tell, anywhere on the ship. When the cruise line asked for her by name over the public address system, they received no response. The higher-ups on the cruise reviewed their CCTV footage and announced that there was video of Rebecca having a conversation on one of the ship's internal phones in a crew area. In the footage, she appears distressed, but it's unknown who she was speaking to or what their conversation was about. At one point during the video, a young man approaches Rebecca and appears to ask her if everything is okay. She appears to respond, "Yeah, fine." After she walks out of the room, her movements are unknown. The crew of the Disney Wonder had searched the entire ship for Rebecca and come up empty-handed, so it stood to reason that she likely fell overboard. The U.S. Coast Guard and Mexican Navy searched the area that the cruise had gone through, but neither party turned up any sign of Rebecca. A detective from the Bahamas was flown out to Los Angeles to investigate the ship once it returned to port, and Rebecca's parents were also flown in from England. This is where the story starts to get a little chaotic because of the numerous and often contradictory details. According to the initial report, the detective had spent several days conducting his investigation aboard the Disney Wonder. When this detective met with Rebecca's parents, however, he told them that he had only spent 1 day on board. He said that he had only interviewed a handful of crew members and none of the passengers. To add to the bizarre nature of the story, Rebecca's parents claimed that when they arrived from England, Disney kept them in a car with blacked-out windows and brought them on board the ship using a small side entrance that wasn't often used by passengers or even crew members. They also apparently waited until all the passengers had disembarked. The ship's captain told them his theory was that Rebecca had been swept overboard by a rogue wave while she was at the crew pool. In 2011, a journalist named John Ronson rode the Disney Wonder on the same route that it had traveled when Rebecca disappeared. The goal of this voyage was to discreetly interview the crew members for any information he could possibly obtain. A bartender said, "It didn't happen. You know that's the answer I have to give." This statement was very suspect, and Ronson studied the ship's layout to come up with his own theory. There was a jogging track on Deck 4 that had low railings, and Rebecca had been known to keep herself in shape by using the track. When he told a deck worker about his theory, the worker said he was wrong. According to this worker, Rebecca had gone overboard from the crew pool. "I was on the ship that day. Everyone knows." He also claimed a flip-flop had been found at the crew pool, which was his proof. This was the same story the captain had told Rebecca's parents, so Ronson decided to take a look at the crew pool. Passengers weren't allowed in that area, but he found a spot where the pool was visible from a higher deck. According to Ronson, the pool was surrounded by a railing, and beyond the railing was a steel wall high enough to block your view of the ocean. Because of this wall, Ronson doubted that Rebecca could have fallen overboard in this location. However, every crew member he spoke to insisted Rebecca had gone overboard at the crew pool. Disney knows exactly what happened. Everything here is taped. There's CCTV everywhere. Disney has the tape. Close to the end of the cruise, another crew member approached Ronson and told him the sea conditions had been rough on the day of Rebecca's disappearance. According to this worker, if the floors had been slippery enough, it would be reasonable to say that Rebecca could have been tossed overboard. When the cruise ended, Ronson was contacted by a woman who had been directed to him by Rebecca's parents. She claimed that the day after Rebecca's disappearance, the company placed flowers on the wall near the crew pool. It really stirred things up. Why were they putting them there? Nothing was clear. Being such a chaotic case, there has been a lot of speculation and quite a few theories have been posited over the years. This is partially due to the secretive nature of Disney's handling of the case. Despite CCTV cameras being all over the ship, why was there only ever one video publicly reported? Furthermore, the way the crew members spoke to John Ronson is very concerning. Many of them claim that Disney knows more about the case than they ever admitted. To add on to the mystery, Rebecca's parents never received a copy of the final police report from the Bahamian police. British detectives received the report, but refused to share it even after Freedom of Information Act requests on the grounds that it contains sensitive personal information. Speculation about the nature of the phone call Rebecca had has also been prominent. One crew member told Ronson that the call was taped, and others claimed that it was with a romantic partner. The woman who Rebecca's parents had directed to Ronson also told him Rebecca had been involved in an intense and turbulent relationship. According to this woman, the call had not been with Rebecca's unknown partner, but with a mutual friend. Because of these claims, the theory of suicide has been scrutinized, but it doesn't seem to hold much weight. Not only was Rebecca's personality an overwhelmingly positive one, but her parents also found passes to visit Disneyland Paris in her room, which she had most likely obtained in order to take a vacation with her parents and sister. Such plans seemed directly contradictory to a desire to commit suicide. Another unsettling development occurred when the same woman who had spoken to Ronson dismissed the notion that a flip-flop had been found at the crew pool. That was the evidence a crew member had cited to Ronson, but the woman claimed the slippers were too big and not Rebecca's style. Rebecca's parents later claimed the slippers were too small, but nobody who worked with Rebecca could remember her wearing them. Private investigators hired by Rebecca's parents eventually stated that the slippers had a different crew member's name and cabin number on them. This only cast more suspicion on Disney, who should have been able to pick up on these details. One final piece of the puzzle presents a rather disturbing possibility. A member of the Labour Party in England, Chris Matheson, claimed to possess a copy of the original police report. According to Matheson, this report had compelling evidence that Rebecca was the victim of a crime. He believed a sexual assault and/or murder was involved in her disappearance. Furthermore, a private investigator who worked with Matheson claimed that records showed the sea conditions were normal on the day of Rebecca's disappearance. He also stated that any wave with the ability to pull someone overboard would have almost certainly caused some visible damage to the ship. So, what do you think about this case? Regardless of the full truth, Disney has clearly been secretive with its information, and it seems as if someone may have covered up what really happened. If that's the case, who is responsible, and why did they want to bury the truth? Was Rebecca murdered by someone with a lot of wealth and power who was able to pull strings at Disney? Or was this case really just a tragic accident? Unfortunately, we may never know the answers to these questions for certain.